Greetings, Jake, and wubba lubba dub dub. I hope you're doing well. So this is a screencast of my feedback on your second essay. I'll kind of talk you through the thoughts that I had about your essay, and then I'll take you through the rubric and kind of explain the grade that you got. You're, of course, allowed to revise this, and we'll talk about any questions that you have during our conference later this week. In that conference, it's going to be in we're not going to have special topics this week. Instead, you guys are going to meet with me for about 10 to 15 minutes to talk about the questions you have about your essay. I have the thesis statement, I think, is a pretty decent start here. The one part where it gets kind of confusing for me, like I get this, the positioning of the soldiers, the dress of the soldiers, and evolution of battle. I'm not sure, this part kind of confused me. And I thought that the way that you had kind of structured it was that they, pride in military service is evident through the use of unity, because that's what this paragraph is about, and then the other, forget what you're talking about here, the positioning of soldiers. So I thought it was like unity and positioning of soldiers. So for me, the thesis statement was just a little bit unclear, because it doesn't really kind of follow what the paragraphs end up doing, at least not the way that I kind of understand it. So that's just a minor issue with the thesis statement. Inside the paragraphs, I felt like talking about one mural and then the second mural. That's kind of setting you up for, an essay that's not going to have much depth to it. And these paragraphs really don't kind of get into too much detail. So you've got the Chickamauga soldiers mural here, and then the next paragraph you have the For Freedom mural. I think what could work better is talking about, alright, so unity is a really important theme in this mural, and this is how they get unity across in these two different murals. So you're talking about Chickamauga and the For Freedom mural at the same time. There's also kind of this weird thing that could be kind of interesting for you to write about. Like, there's a bit of diversity. As much as they are unified, there's also a little bit of diversity here. These soldiers look, they're not all the same. Some are in different military attire, but they're all unified and working as a group. And then this group here, we're also talking about military service members, and they're different. Like, there's some diversity. You got a woman here, you have an African-American man here, working in different branches, but they're all kind of unified in some way. Visually speaking, they're all kind of unified, but they're all different. So I think that could be an interesting idea that you could follow up on, but you don't necessarily have to. What I do want to make perfectly clear is that you definitely need to talk about more than one mural here. And you're doing this in places you're talking about things that aren't necessarily relevant to the analysis. Like, I think it's definitely necessary to say something about the Battle of Chickamauga and say that it was a crucial battle, but I'm not necessarily sure how that helps you talk about unity. And the point that you try to make where, like, they needed to be unified because this was such a big battle, I guess I take that point, but it just seems like it doesn't really, like, there's not enough there for an entire paragraph. So I think talking about both of the murals is really kind of necessary in all your paragraphs. Just talking about one doesn't really cut it. Okay, so that I think is a big issue that relates to both of these two paragraphs. The positioning. So, I mean, you could have an essay that's talking just about, like, how visually they try to get unity across, and then how the positioning of the soldiers in the mural, or the appearance of the soldiers in the mural, how they try to get pride across. I think connecting everything back to pride, I think, is probably a really cool idea. You do it a better job down here than you do up here. But I think you could really just have an essay that's about unity and about, I guess, just visually speaking, how they represent soldiers, like what the soldiers look like, how they're depicted, how they're positioned in the mural. So you could have just two sections of your essay, which might be 2 paragraphs each or something like that. But I think that might be a better way of going about organizing your thoughts. And kind of towards the end here, it seemed like you really weren't sure where to go, so I'm not sure if there's much of these are going to be useful as you kind of move forward. I do think you have something here with these two paragraphs. I just think that they kind of need to speak to each other a little bit more in terms of like you writing about the different murals like in the same paragraphs, and then making it like connecting the ideas back to this idea of pride that they're trying to get across. Like that needs to happen throughout. You do it in some places, but not enough. I don't think just yet. Beyond that, I thought that this was a good draft. It's better than some of the others that I've seen, so I think you're going to be in pretty decent shape. I noticed that you didn't cite the two of the three sources that I mentioned, and I guess I'm fine with you doing this, but I think these tell you more about the battle, and I was hoping that you would use the other sources because they tell you a little bit more about murals and could maybe help you analyze the murals a little bit more directly, but I think it's your call. The sources, the way that you integrated them, it was a little kind of confusing at places, like things kind of come in out of left field, like right here. I think that this is a quote, but I wasn't exactly sure. And then, let's see, you got another quote around here. Like down here, you kind of end a paragraph with a quote. So the quotes really, I mean, I think that's a paraphrase there, but you're ending with detail that's coming from another source, and you're not kind of like connecting it back to what it is you're saying as a whole about these two murals. So if I could summarize, like I think you need a paragraph that discusses the unity idea, another paragraph that discusses how soldiers are positioned and how they're represented, and you need to talk about both murals in those paragraphs. And these paragraphs might grow to be a little bit larger, or you might need to split them out and do kind of talking about unity in terms of how they all look the same, but then also there's slight differences and how those are still kind of working towards a message of unity. I'm not sure how you could split it up, but I think that might be one way. So you'll have two kind of sections to your paper. Looks like you might have some cutting at the end that you might need to do, and I think that's kind of the bigger stuff. There's no transitioning at this point. Like it's not clear why you're going from this part to this part, and I'm curious like why you have this section here before you go on to this section. So on the rubric, when it comes to organization and transitioning, I'm not seeing it just yet, but that's something for you to think about, like why are you going from this part to this part? And so once you have an answer to that, you'll want to make sure that in your writing it's a little bit clearer, like how you're moving from one to the other. Okay, so let me go to the grading rubric so you can kind of see what I did. I'll change this around just in a second so you can see what I'm getting at. God damn it, alright, there it goes. So E2 rubric. So I thought thesis statement, it's close. It's definitely got some of the reasons are not all that clear, like what comes after the because statement, but it's clear that you're making a claim. Supporting details, you include some in some places, but there are a few other places where more detail I think would have been helpful, and I can help you look at those on Thursday when we meet. Organization and transitioning, I didn't see kind of a rationale for why you have ideas in one place as opposed to another, so I didn't think it was there. It's not close just yet, but I think it can get there. Source integration, you're close there, but I think a little bit more setup and always discussing your quotes or your paraphrases afterwards, that's needed. And then MLA format, the visuals, I thought you did a good job with the visuals. And then the semicolons, they were okay. I think that first one that you had in the first sentence, it wasn't clear like how the two sentences were kind of related to each other, and you just had a semicolon between them. Anyhow, that's where you're at. So this essay is not there just yet, so give it like a 1 or something like that. Your grading scale, it's close, it's on its way. So we'll chat on Thursday, so list any questions that you have, and I'd be happy to help you.